Do you struggle to learn your scales or remember all those different accidentals you've got to play? Well, you're in the right place. Today we're going to look at a technique that puts all that to one side and allows you to learn your scales in a much more fluent fashion. Also, stick around because I'm going to tell you how to get your hands on a bunch of free video resources that will really help boost your technique. So let's get into it. So when you first begin to learn saxophone and you start learning your first scales, they're generally the simple scales like C major and G major and F major that have very few accidentals to remember. However, as you progress and start learning more complicated scales like B major and E major and even C sharp or A flat major, there's a lot of accidentals that we tend to feel that we need to memorize or remember all the way through these scales to be able to play them properly and learn them in the first place. Now, I'm going to share with you a method today that negates all that stuff. So you only really need to think about the theory behind the scale once and then convert it immediately into motor action. Now, if you've come to the saxophone later in life, it's often said that the older you get, the slower you learn. But I fundamentally disagree with that, and I've been teaching students to play the saxophone for over 30 years. I think the big difference as you get older is you become more analytical. If I was to tell an 8-year-old who's playing saxophone to play an E flat major scale and I told them the notes, they'd just play it. They wouldn't ask me any questions about it, they'd just do it. However, if I was to ask somebody in their 50s or late 40s to do it, then they'd say, well, why? Why is it called an E flat major scale? What is a major scale? And you start getting all these questions. You need to know why you're doing it. And this ultimately slows down learning. Now, I remember many years ago, I had a student who was a little bit older. She was a doctor, actually, a very, very intelligent woman. And they're just doing our basic first gradings. She needed to learn a D major scale. Now, I said, we've got to do this D major scale. We've got this exam coming up. She said, why is it called a D major scale? Why is a major scale a major scale? So I went into the theory of major scales and tones and semitones. We ended up then talking about the cycle of fourths and all sorts of theory. And after about 3 lessons, I realised that she still hadn't played the D major scale. So when it came to the next scale that we needed to learn, I took on a different approach in order to get her to play it without overthinking the accidentals and the theory behind it. And that's the method I'm going to share with you today. Now, when you first learn a scale, you generally learn it over 1 octave, up and down. As you advance a little, you're going to do this over an extended range, so you may do that scale over an octave and a fifth, or maybe over 2 octaves. And as you get into an intermediate player or an advanced player, what you really need to do is play that scale over the full range of your instrument, from the lowest possible note in that scale to the highest note in the scale. So if we took a scale like G major, for example, you'd want to be playing it from your low B, the lowest possible note, all the way up to your top F sharp, the highest possible note, and if you can go into altissimo, even higher. And that's what we want to end up with our technique, this flexibility to play a scale over the full range of our instrument. We're really thinking more about key signatures at that stage rather than thinking about a scale which has a very definitive start and end point. Now, no matter which one of these we're playing, there's going to be some movement in both our right hand and our left hand. And if we're starting low on the saxophone, there's going to be some movement in the bell key region, and there's going to be some movement at the top in our palm keys, those top notes. And what this means is we can divide the saxophone up into 4 areas: bell keys at the bottom, our right hand, left hand, and palm keys. So in this lesson, I'm going to teach you something without you knowing what it is. So it's a practical lesson, so I'd like you to pause this video, go and grab your sax, and come back and we'll get started. So we're just going to focus on our right hand and left hand. So first of all, I'm going to put these notes up on screen. I'm not going to tell you what the purpose of them are. I'm just going to show you the notes. And you can see that we've got the notes D sharp, E, F sharp, and G. Now have a look at those notes on screen and just run your fingers up and down them a couple of times and think about the shape that you're playing. And then I'd like you to look away from the screen, pause this video and literally play up and down those notes just in your right hand over and over again, just like this. Now what you should feel is that just becomes a shape in your right hand. You go up and down until you find yourself thinking about what you're going to have for your dinner tonight. And what you've done there is you've locked in the motor action in your right hand for this particular scale. You're not really thinking about the notes and the accidentals that you're playing anymore. It's just a shape on the saxophone. It's motor action. So let's move on to a shape for our left hand. And this is going to entail the G, just like we played in the right hand. And you might say, well, we've already done the G. But to me, the G is a fingering of both hands. It's no fingers for the right hand and all fingers for the left hand. So we're going to start on the note G and we're going to have G, A, B flat. And I suggest using your B flat biz key for this, C, and C sharp. Now, if you're using the B flat biz key, don't forget you can keep that key held down for the G and the A as well, so you're not having to slide to it at the last minute. So keeping that biz key down, you're going to have this little shape in your left hand, which is G, A, B flat, C, and C sharp. It's a really nice little motor action shape. I'd like you to just once again play up and down it a few times, just like this. If you enjoy content like this, don't forget to subscribe down below and click that like button to let us know that you want more videos like this. Now, I mentioned in the intro that you could get your hands on some free video resources. So follow the link in the description and not only will you get the resources for this lesson, but you'll also get 6 finger workout videos that I've created looking at all these kind of elements and some others to really get your fingers going. They're only 2-minute exercises, but you'll learn a lot from them. So don't forget to click the link in the description and get all those resources absolutely free. So what I'd like you to check is that you've remembered the shape from your right hand just by playing up and down it a couple of times, and then play the shape in the left hand a couple of times as well. And what we're going to do is we're going to consolidate the two shapes. So we're going to play from that low D sharp up to the C sharp and back down again. If you need to repeat that a couple of times, do that. That's absolutely fine until once again you realise you're thinking about something else and it's just a shape on the saxophone. Now we're going to do it again, but instead of coming back down when we get to that C sharp, we're just going to add the octave key and do exactly the same shape with the octave key down to give us it in the second octave. When we get to that top C sharp, we're just going to play back down again, taking off our octave key in the lower octave and getting all the way down to that low D sharp. Good work. So hopefully that's feeling really comfortable now. And if it's sounding a little bit strange and maybe a little bit unfamiliar, or maybe to some of you, you're listening to it and going, I've heard that sound before, what you've just actually learned is a diminished scale. Never mind the more complicated major scales with all their accidentals. You've just learnt a symmetrical jazz scale that comes up not just in jazz, by the way, it comes up in lots of film music and classical composition as well. And it's a really interesting scale because it's completely symmetrical. It's going semitone, tone, semitone, tone all the way through if you actually analyse what you've just been playing. And that means you've learnt not only the D sharp, what's called the half whole diminished scale, but the F sharp half whole and the A half whole and the C half whole. And you've also learnt the E, G, B flat and C sharp whole half diminished scales. You've just learnt 8 different scales just by learning a right hand movement and a left hand movement, running them up and down a couple of times, adding them together and then doing them across your full range. Now, if I said to you at the beginning of this lesson, what we're going to do is learn a diminished scale and not only learn the 2 modes of the diminished scale, but learn it in 4 keys, then you probably would have said, I think I'm going to turn off this lesson. But you can see you've just learned something ultimately quite complicated by just learning some really basic shapes on your saxophone. And this method can be used for any scale or arpeggio that you ever come across. What does the right hand do? What does the left hand do? That's the only time you're going to need to understand the theory. Which notes do you need to play in that hand? Once you've done it and got the shape, you can forget all about that and just run them up and down. Now, if you want to take this a step further, then you can work out the notes that you'd have to play using the low bell keys, and you can work out the notes that you need to play using your top palm keys, like this. Once again, I'd just run those up and down as separate areas, and then I'd add them in with the other right and left hand shapes to get the full scale across the entire range of my saxophone. What's really good about this method is not only is it really simple, but this is the end game of learning anything on an instrument. It's to turn it into motor action so you don't need to think about what you're playing. And this is really important if you're into improvisation, whether that's jazz, pop or soul or any other type of improvisation. You need that flexibility to have the shapes under your fingers so you can be creative and not trying to worry about accidentals and all this kind of stuff that can often get in the way. So if you want to grab the resources for today's lesson, the link's in the description. And not only does it have the diminished scale that we've worked on today, but there's also a chart there for all the major and minor scales broken down into bell key, right hand, left hand and palm key shapes. So you can practice all these shapes individually and put them all together to be able to play all 12 major and minor scales really simply. And when you download those resources, you'll also get access to the 6 finger workout video lessons that I've done that work on all sorts of little awkward areas of your technique to give you a real boost. The exercises themselves are only 2 minutes long, plus an explanation, and they're just great little things to work on to really help your finger dexterity and just make the saxophone that bit easier. So try this method out with some scales that you've been struggling with and see if it really helps your progression and just gets them in there a lot quicker than reading them from the page or trying to remember all those accidentals. And let me know in the comments how you get on. I'll be really interested to see if this works for you. So until next time, take care and I'll see you then. Bye bye.